Okay, so more evolution. Coevolution, when you see that word, think of mutualism. When you think of mutualism, remember that it's two species evolve after time to live closely together. It's a symbiotic relationship. And a perfect example, which will be a definite question on the AP exam, is pollination. Pollination is an extreme case of mutualism, and it's a perfect example of coevolution. Here we have convergent, and just like you learned before in the birth of Earth, when you have convergent boundaries, they come together. Well, in this case, you're going to have two distinct species, like you see in this picture, the falcon and the pterodactyl, and over time, you ended up with a bat that had similar traits to their early ancestors. In divergent, it's kind of going backwards. You're going to have one species, and then two related species will be a result of some environmental condition. And the perfect example of that is Darwin's finches. Something happens to their environment where they develop specific traits for survival. Evolution by artificial selection, or evolution of selective breeding, or GMOs, hot topic in environmental science. We obviously modify organisms, genetically modify organisms for our benefit, especially crops, to meet the needs of our current food crisis. So keep that in mind for the later chapters. Evolution of resistance. Remember the video I showed you, and it basically is the ability of an organism to develop resistance to a particular chemical which is designed to kill, and bacteria and pests are a perfect example of this type of evolution, and it is the best example of evolution happening today. Remember to watch the link. When evolution takes place, you're going to have speciation, which is basically the development of a new species from a pre-existing species. You have to know these two types of speciation. One deals directly with environmental conditions, or I would say geographical conditions, like tectonic plates, dried up rivers, river formations, mountain formations, any kind of geographical issue that divides a population in half. So in this case, here's allopatric, where you have the original population divided by probably a earthquake, and you have two distinct species that come out of, or I'm sorry, a new species that arises. Original species stays the same. In this case, sympatric, there's no geographical isolation. Basically, you have a population, and within that population, a new species arises. Oh, and this is actually a rare case of evolution. Most species in that area will somehow mate or reproduce. Here's examples of geographical isolation: Pangea, like we mentioned earlier, and river formations or lack of. Here's an example of reproductive isolation, which is more of the sympatric speciation, where you have organisms on the same location and somehow they develop into a new species. Ecological evolution, or evolution of ecosystems, is called ecological succession, and this is a change within an ecosystem over time. And this image kind of shows you how you start off with low shrubs or weeds, and eventually you can end up with a forest if you let it develop. Primary succession. In this scenario, you're going to have a lifeless habitat, and that means there is no soil. So your primary species are going to be your lichens and your mosses, or your pioneer species. You need to know both of those words. And they will break down the rock, and with weathering combined, they'll form soil. From soil, you're going to have what is, herbs. From herbs, you're going to have heath mat. And this exact scenario may show up on the AP exam. You also have to know that the first developing trees in a forest are pine, and eventually you're going to have the hardwood trees, which are like oak. In secondary succession, you start with soil, so it's not a lifeless habitat. And there is no introduction of primary species. You're going to have in soil, there's organisms, decomposers, insects, there's nutrients, there's water, so all the components necessary for life, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. And over time, you'll have the same conditions.